Hey guys, it's Mr. Walker here again. Welcome back to another math lesson with Mr. Walker. Today we're continuing. Is that the word I'm looking? Yes, continuing on in our journey of shapes. Right. Yesterday we talked about quadrilaterals and we talked about trapezoids, and we learned that a quadrilateral is any shape with four sides, and that a trapezoid, we kind of learned a couple different definitions, but the definition we went with is that a trapezoid has to have at least one side of parallel sides. Okay, so we're going to continue on working with some shapes today, and actually today our goal is to draw parallelograms and clarify them according to their attributes, and define them and measure them and do different stuff with the angles. So we're going to be working with parallelograms today, but before we jump into that, let's review what a parallelogram is. And I'm going to be outsourcing my math vocabulary for today, so we're going to take a look at a couple quick little clips about what a parallelogram is so we can kind of put some frame of reference around what we're doing today. So check out those clips and then we'll come right back and talk about what we're going to do. Alright, awesome. So here's what we're going to need for today. So you're going to need a ruler, okay, and a protractor. And if you have like something that you can help to make a square, to make some parallel lines, that would be great, whether it's like even another piece of paper or something you can kind of lay out that has square on it, like a straight edge, so you can help make some parallel lines. That'd be great. Maybe something to draw with, something to write with, some clean pieces of paper, things like that, because we're gonna be making some parallelograms today, and taking a look at what they're like and what we can do with them. Okay, so go ahead and gather that stuff up, and when you're ready to keep going and make some parallelograms, I get stuck on that sometimes. Go ahead and click continue, and we'll keep going. Okay, so since we're going to start today by drawing a quadrilateral, and we're going to begin with one pair of parallel sides. So far, it's basically like a trapezoid, right? So if I wanted to draw a trapezoid that could also be a parallelogram, what else would I need to include in my quadrilateral? If I had one set of parallel sides, that would be a trapezoid. I'm going to need two sets of parallel sides to make it a parallelogram, all right? So let's see, I'm going to start by, let's do this. I'm going to draw one set of parallel lines. So there's a line there, and there's a line there, and they're parallel. Now, if you were drawing this on paper, you could use your ruler to draw it across. You can measure down and make sure that you're the same distance away at both ends. You could use a square or a straight edge. Let's see, something like this, so you can get a certain distance away from your first line, and then draw your other line right along that. Just make sure they're squared up. Okay, so there's some different options you have to draw that those parallel lines. Okay, so just make sure the parallel, again, doesn't have to be perfect, but we want them, a parallel line. By definition, they're going to run next to each other. They're never going to touch. Okay, so there's my parallel lines. Now I'm going to draw another set of parallel lines to close off my parallelogram here. All right, let's see what we got. So I could just come like straight down at 90 degrees if I want, even though that would be a rectangle or a square depending on the length of my sides. That would still be considered a parallelogram, right? I'm just going to change things up a little bit though, and move these lines out. So if I tilt this one that much and I tilt this one like the same way, same amount, perfect. So there's my parallelogram, and you could see I just moved this side over here, but you can see that my sides are running together. They're never going to touch there, and even if I were to like expand these out, they're always going to run parallel to each other. They're never going to touch. So that's how I know I have a parallelogram. Okay, so now what I want you guys to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the sides of my parallelogram. Okay, so I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to start at the 0, not at the end of the ruler, right? We learned that, and I'm going to measure just the length of my parallelogram, and I'm going to write it down. I want you guys to do the same things, and then let's talk about what we've got. Alright, so I measured these up, and would you look at this? Even though I didn't purposely set out to do it this way, when I measured all of my lengths here on my parallelogram, I ended up with the same measurements on opposite sides. So this side matches this side, and this side is the same length as this side. Even though I didn't try to do that, it worked out that way, right? All right, and mine are different lengths, okay? My top and bottom are different than my sides, and that's totally fine. You might have had a parallelogram that actually ended up being the same on all sides, so it's and that's fine too. But it's kind of cool that they have the matching lengths on the different sides, right? So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to label the angles, the corners of my parallelogram here. We'll do A, B, C, and D if you want to go ahead and label yours as well. And now I'm going to use my protractor to measure these angles. So let's see, I'm going to line this protractor up here, the corner there. Got to rotate it a bit to fit on that line. Perfect. So here's my 0. And if I count around 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, I'd say we're right about 75 there. Okay, so let me label that. D is 75 degrees. Cool. Let me come up to this guy here. Line this up. Perfect. Come around here, and this one looks like about, if I start at 0, come around, I'm at 90, 100, 110, about halfway in there, so that's 105. Let's write that in there, 105 degrees. Perfect. I'm going to keep measuring my angles. Why don't you measure yours as well, and then we'll come back in and we'll talk about what we found. Well, would you look at this? Now that I've measured all my angles, look at my opposite angles here. They're matching, right? And if I were to add up the opposite angles here, so like this 105 and this 75, that would get me to 180, which is that straight edge, and which is the same kind of thing we found yesterday with our trapezoid, right? The angles added up to, two of the opposite angles would add up to 180, and all of the angles together would be 360. So we have the same thing going on here with our parallelogram, which is kind of cool. All right, interesting. So we're going to try one more thing here. I'm going to bring my ruler back in. We're going to dissect this a little bit more. And we're going to measure from like the diagonal of this parallelogram, right? So from point A to point C, point B to point D. So we're going to measure these diagonals just to kind of dissect this and take another look at it, okay? So I'm going to actually line up my ruler here. I'm going to start at the 0 right there, measure across. Let's see if I can get a pretty good look here. So this is a little trickier to do virtually here, but it looks like we're sitting at about 6.5. So I would say we're at 6.5 or 6 5/10, because I'm using my metric ruler now. So we'll say that this diagonal here is 6 5/10. So let me go ahead and draw a line real quick from this guy to this guy. Perfect. And then we will label that as 6 5/10. Cool. So let me go ahead and swing this around, and we'll measure the opposite way. Any guesses on what this is going to turn out as? So it looks to me that this one's right around 8.5 is what we'd be looking at there. So it looks to me, according to my ruler there, that was about 8.5 or 8 5/10. Okay, so cool. So we have these two distances here. I'm actually going to change some colors here so we can see this a little bit better. Cool. So that green line going this way, that diagonal is 8 5/10. And then we'll change this one. Going the other way from A to C, we're going to change that to yellow, make it a nice yellow color to stand out. So we can see that they're going to have different lengths going through here. So these segments aren't equal to each other, but that's not always going to be the case. Depending on how you drew your parallelogram, like mine is a little bit longer. So in my lengths are a little bit longer than my widths. So that means that my diagonals are going to be a little bit different as well, and that's okay. But let's take a look at this real quick. I'm going to come in here to the middle, and I'm going to label a new spot here, a new point. And we're just going to call this the middle. Okay, we're going to label it M for middle. So you can see these kind of like, we're kind of like taking apart, kind of like breaking apart this parallelogram a little bit just to notice some seams and some differences that we're going to see in here. This point right here where these angles, or where we've drawn this line across our parallelogram, that's called like a bisection point. We have bisected this parallelogram. We've kind of like cut it into those pieces, okay? So like this yellow line we drew here, we've bisected it. So if you think of like bicycle, we've cut it into two parts, here and here. Those are our two parts. The green line going this way, we cut it into two parts. We've bisected it. We've cut it into two. So we've really been able to kind of like break down this parallelogram and look at the different parts of it and stuff like that. So you guys are going to practice a little bit more with this today, but let's actually practice a little bit more together first before you guys try it on your own. Let's try to kind of try some together. So if I wanted to draw a parallelogram with no right angles, well, that's pretty much what I did here, right? None of these angles are right angles. They're either bigger than right angle or smaller than a right angle, which is great. If I wanted one with two right angles, at least two right angles, well, let's see, I would have to have here and here, so that would be one right angle, and then here and here would be two right angles. So these lines would be parallel, and I got to make another line parallel to this one, so we're pretty much looking at a rectangle there, okay? So that's how that's going to be. Next one is an equal side. If I want to draw a parallelogram with equal sides but no right angles. So again, I'm looking at a parallelogram that's going to look kind of like this, but I'm going to want my sides to be equal. So let's just start with this then. Let's go here. Here, those two look about the same. So through the computer wizardry, I could just kind of copy and paste these and line them up in such a way that I have made a parallelogram with equal sides. Okay, so you can see that that one's going to have to kind of tilt a little bit because we don't want the right angles in there, but we want our sides to be equal. Okay, so we can kind of play around with them there and make some different parallelograms based on that. So you guys are going to practice with this some more today. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me and watching this so far and playing along with some parallelograms. Okay, kind of cool stuff. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, please reach out and let me know. But have some fun with this today. Get your hands dirty, make some shapes, and enjoy it. Okay. I thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.